Okay, Alison, that's good to go.
Thanks, Sarah. So as you do that frantic thing where you go, where's the unmute button? As if it's the first video call you've ever done. Thank you, Sarah, much appreciated. I will just kind of run through how this is going to work today. So a bit of a welcome from me, and then I'm going to hand over to Donna McHugh, who is our webinar sponsor today. So those of you with beady eyes on our social media and other channels will have seen that the Chamber does a digital takeover that lets members come in and get a bit of extra exposure for something in particular they might want to do. And Loganair, we were grateful to have their support and delighted to be able to help them showcase their message. So Donna's going to say a few words. Then it'll be back to me. And I'll just do a little bit of an update on what the Chamber's been doing, and then I'm going to hand over to Shona Dobby, who has been working really hard with us on our economic indicator report and our index. And then we'll have time at the end for questions, and hopefully Shona and I will have a bit of a discussion about the report and some of the work that we've been doing. So a massive welcome to you all. It's great to have such a great audience, not only on our webinar, but for us to be able to take this event out to Facebook Live. So thank you to you for all showing up and turning up. And Donna, I'm going to hand over to you now, if you can unmute yourself. And then once I can hear you and we can see your screen, I will get out of your way.
Hopefully that's me unmuted.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see whether the screen sharing looks okay.
So far, so good.
Clear. Okay. Mm-hmm. Is that show full screen, or do I need to do anything to make that? Is that taking over the full screen?
It looks good to me. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much, Alison, and the Chamber, as usual, great partnership for us. We've had some excellent opportunities to work alongside you for a very long time now, and most exciting time of ever has been kind of coming back into London City and getting ourselves back to Dundee. So good to see us kind of growing in Dundee. I'll just take this opportunity just to run you through a little bit of where we are in Dundee at the moment. I've not really focused too much on where we are on a larger scale. Because to be honest with you, it's ever changing. Every time the ink dries on what our plan is, it changes again, and it's, I'm sure, exact replica of where all of you are in your businesses as well, and it's pretty devastating. I'd like to say, in adversity, there's always opportunity, and I'm struggling in the darker days at the moment to see that. But anyway, this is one I prepared yesterday. Forgive me if this message changes by the time we finish this seminar this morning. So if you don't already know me, I'm Donna McHugh. I'm Head of Revenue and Sales at Loganair. I've been at Loganair since 1992 in various guises, so kind of seen us all sizes coming through lots of difficult situations and lots of great sort of opportunities that we've really embraced. So kind of seen the good, the bad, and at the moment sitting a bit with the ugly. So I'll give you a bit of a view of where we are with Dundee at the moment, and happy to answer any questions you have at the end, or I'll give you my contact details. Come back to me with anything that you want to know. So currently we have two routes out of Dundee. London City, final return to London City, which I know was a very popular choice for people in Dundee and Angus. And we're running a full business schedule to London City at the moment. Everything's subject to change, so this is almost like how we would be in normal times. I've put a screenshot there of our timetable to Belfast, but at the moment we're only running Friday, Sunday service. What we're mainly seeing is a leisure bite on that. When we come back to any sort of level of demand, we'll increase that to Monday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday. And the Dundee London City has only just mid-September come back up to anything like a business programme. Less subject to change than other flights on the network because of the PSO that's in place. But, nobody's going to fly for no reason. So hopefully we'll stay at this level, but I can't say that that's a definite. The aircraft we have on this is a turboprop. It's an ATR 42, which is a fairly modern really fast, reliable, and most importantly, aircraft that's able to cope with London City. So able to sail the full capacity coming out of London City, which is obviously really important. Really comfortable aircraft, a 30-inch seat pitch, nice and fast, 560 kilometres an hour is its speed. So a very comfortable ride to London or Belfast. We've never changed in that we've always included a bag, which is quite unusual. Part of that's because of the limited cabin size we have. We have one seat on one side, two on the other, so we don't have bins above both sides of the seats. So it would be disingenuous of us to charge you for something that we couldn't really deliver, and we can't really give you the space to take all your bags on board. So realistically, we'll probably never change from giving you a free bag. So 15 kilos is standard, and the FlyFlex ticket, which can be anything from kind of 15 to maybe £30 more depending on demand. That gives you additional luggage and additional flexibility. You can move about with no change fee, and it gives you additional clan points. We also offer child fares, student fares, things that are quite outdated, but we've kind of clung on to. We think it's really important. A lot of our flying is done within the community and it's not taken for granted. So we try and listen and respond to what your individual needs are. Just put a wee snapshot of what our lowest return fares are on these markets. I've looked next May. I could have looked closer in. We're pretty generous in pricing at the moment, but I just had a look for summer flights. And under £100 return to Belfast and under £120 return to London City. Obviously, these flights, if they're busy flights or they're at peak times or they're within a week of travel, you're not going to get these fares. I'm not going to pretend you are. But if you ever see us advertising our fares, just know that we have to have 10% of that fare. This isn't an advert. They have to have 10% of that fare available if we have an advert to comply with the regulations. So if you can't find it, you're struggling with it, then come to me, come to customer services, and we'll help you. We're not going to put a number out there that we can't deliver. We're also one of the few regional airlines that have a royalty programme, and that's Clan Loganair. So that is very straightforward. It's not about your fuel or your shopping or anything else. It really is just you'll be rewarded for flying. So the more you fly, depending on what fare family you've booked in, the more quickly you'll accrue your points, and you just exchange your points for flights. And I would say that probably the availability on that is maybe up to about 70% of capacity, which again, having worked with various airlines partnerships in the past, I've never seen anything as generous. So it is very much a case of it's almost like a perceived sort of discount for loyalty. So take full advantage of that. Make sure you're signed up to the programme. We also let our clan members have advance notice for any sales, and we usually have at least 2 sales a year. And you get additional points for various things. So it's well worth being part of. We don't tend to bombard you with marketing unless we think it's relevant to you. So we won't take too much advantage of the fact you signed up. It would be more in your interest than just for us to have you in a database, definitely. And then I had a video there for our hygiene protocol, but it was kind of struggling to play. So I'll send it in to Alison and they'll be able to share it with you. It just shows you the lengths we are going to at the moment to ensure that you have confidence flying with us. I know the airports are working really, really hard at letting you see, and we're inviting people out on the network just now, influential travellers who will feed back to their organisations what their experience is. So it'll be themselves that will manage it. We'll just facilitate it. So you can see their journey through an airport, on an aircraft, and with this video that I'll send in, you'll be able to see that the lengths we're going to. Hygiene's always important, but never more so than now, and we are taking it very, very seriously, as I hope you'll see from the video that I send in. I think Alison said she would share, or Sarah said she would share this presentation, so you should be able to see the video on that, and I've also put all our contacts on the back of it, so feel free to come to me. Normally your area is covered by Greg White, and I'll actually add him into the slide at the moment because we are he's working part-time and we have a lot of new areas, and with Flybe going down we took on quite a lot of new routes in March and then immediately furloughed everybody in March, so didn't really get going with a lot of that. But at the moment the sales team are working very hard on the London market and Southampton and various other areas that are really new to us. I've picked up one of my old favourites, Dundee and Aberdeen, because when we were much smaller, that would have been my responsibility. So you're stuck with me for the next 6 months or so. But I'll share Greg on the slide as well. You'll know that he'll be your kind of long-term contact as well. We're all completely approachable though, so don't feel that one person manages one area. And I've put the contact centre details in there as well, their opening times, their telephone number, and also if you want to sign up for our newsletter, it also gives you just advance notice of anything that's going on. Again, we're not over the top in what we do. Hopefully you'll find it relevant, and we do try and sort of split it out by regions. So that's kind of my update from Loganair as of 9 a.m. this morning. Who knows where we'll be by 9 p.m. today, but fingers crossed we'll all weather through this. And thanks very much for your attention and your time this morning.
Thank you, Donna. Much appreciated for that. Everybody that has ever flown through Dundee Airport knows what a great experience it is, and when people are much more freely able to be moving around, I know people will use it, and I know particularly people in our team from a leisure point of view, friends and family in Belfast and others that I really can't wait to be able to use that service. So it's the old adage of use it or lose it, and I know that this is not necessarily a time where people are doing quite so much business travel, but it's just a brilliant resource to have on our doorstep. So thanks, Donna, thank you for that. Also, I watch Loganair's social media and often see those flights that land on Barra on the beach and think, oh, that's definitely something I've got to do. Might wait for next summer, but I'm still going to do it.
Barra's phenomenal. I've done it maybe 3 times in my total career, and all of the times I've done it have been in the winter because I can't get on in the summer. It's completely, we could sell 5 times the capacity in the summer minimum, and we don't need the seats in the winter. So I only get to go in the winter usually for meetings, and honestly it's like landing in the Caribbean. I've got some footage of it on my phone and it's phenomenal. It's an amazing experience. We do an adventure day on that actually, where you can do a return trip for £75 or £79. You just do the landing, the experience. So you don't get off, you don't go anywhere, you just go, you land, and you come back on the same flight again, and it's an absolutely breathtaking experience, really amazing. And we don't normally permit it in the summer because of demand, but this year we have been able to give it in the summer as well, which is, it's hopefully the only year we will ever be able to do this. So if you've ever wanted to do the trip, it's less than £80 for the experience, and well worth it. Great. That's me finished with my plug now. I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you. So today obviously is the second in our Chamber Economic Indicator live events, and I just want to give you a bit of a run through on some of the things from a Chamber point of view that we've been doing, and then I'm going to hand over to Shona. So we, for the very, very first time, are in the midst of delivering a virtual trade mission, and the Chamber network is working really hard with Scottish Government to help chambers like ours that have never done this kind of activity before get ourselves really well up to speed and build strong international connections for businesses. So one of my colleagues, Keith, has worked really hard in helping Scottish businesses get connected into the Dubai and the UAE market. For those of you that haven't heard us bang on about it before, Dundee and Dubai are sister cities, and as the only UK city that enjoys that relationship with Dubai, it's really exciting for Dundee to be able to take not only Dundee and Angus businesses, but Scottish businesses virtually there, and in real life we will be there at some point next year, just to look at the wider market. So Dubai has got lots of opportunities. There's Expo happening next year, a massive global event that will see all sorts of business to business opportunities come to fruition, but also as a gateway into the GCC and that wider part of the world, there are so many business opportunities. So a group of 9 Scottish businesses are working very hard this week to connect into that market. They're having business to business meetings. We've got meetings to tell them about what's happening in the market. And then tomorrow we've got the UAE's Minister for International Trade, the ambassador to the UK, who usually is based in the UK Embassy in London, and a senior director from Dubai Chamber of Commerce, who will be meeting our delegates and just learning a bit about what their businesses are, telling them a bit about how to do business in the market, and just beginning to open up conversations. And I'd like to say a massive thank you to Keith and our team, Steve Smith, who's our Vice President, and to the Al Maktoum College, who've really helped us, along with SDI and SDI's colleagues in market, to make this virtual trade mission such an absolute success. It's enormously stressful, it's hard work, and is such a big learning curve for us. But it's not the only one that we'll be doing, and we're looking forward to doing similar work this year virtually with the Netherlands. And the Netherlands will be based around Rotterdam and will have quite strong connections to the circular economy and sustainability, plus also Rotterdam Port and the masses of opportunities that there are there. So if you're interested in exploring business in the Netherlands, or if you think that Virginia might be for you, and again, based around one of Dundee's twin cities, Alexandria is just outside of Washington, but the wider Virginia state's got huge opportunities in tech and in sustainability and all sorts of bioscience and different markets. So please get in touch with us if international markets might be your thing and you want to explore it. The other thing that we launched this year was a system to help, obviously primarily hospitality businesses, but anybody really that has to look after visitors to your business, and you would like to log them in a safe and secure way. So the Test and Protect digital system that we launched lets any business in Dundee and Angus for free use the Chamber system. So check that out at protect.dundeeandangus.scot. You can sign up your business really easily. We look after the data for you. The data is kept under strict GDPR rules and is destroyed as is needed. But if in your premises somebody gets exposed to the virus and we need to then alert NHS systems, then we will do that and look after that for you, so you can safely get rid of all data in your premises and not have to worry about those side of things. We'll support. And then the other thing is that we launched a startup offer for new businesses. So if you're a business in your first year and either you're finding it difficult to connect to networks, or you're looking for a bit of extra support, or you can't cope with the demand, and there are many businesses that have started up that are seeing a gap in the market and are doing really well. So we have an offer that's £100 for your Chamber membership for that first year. And so get in touch with us at membership@dundeeandanguschamber.co.uk if that sounds like it's up your street. So I think enough about the Chamber and what we've been doing elsewhere. I'm hugely excited to bring this update and this report for you today. We have long worked with Scottish Chambers and British Chambers of Commerce to do economic indicator work, to do surveys and talk to businesses about what's going on. Thank you to every single one of you that took the time to fill in our survey. And we last quarter decided that it was time to have our own report and work really closely with a local economist. So to give her our Sunday name, Dr. Shona Dobby, we worked together for a long time at Alliance Trust. And I was the event manager at that time, behind the stage, watching Shona go on stage and talk about all sorts of things and predict, she'll not use that word probably, but all sorts of financial issues and the previous credit crunch. So yeah, really delighted to be working with Angus Economics on our report. So I am going to share my screen while Shona does her presenting. So let me just see that I can do this. Shona, if you could unmute yourself and let me know that you can see what's going on here.
Yeah, that seems to be working, Alison.
Okay. And now do we have the GDP growth slide?
Yeah.
Good.
Perfect.
Okay. Over to you, Shona. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Alison. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. We did have some issues with my microphone earlier on, but hopefully now that I'm perched very close to the computer, it should work okay. So the last 10, 12 years has, for economists, been a really interesting time. We've had the global financial market crisis, we had the Scottish referendum, we had the Brexit referendum, and now we've got a global pandemic. So as I say, for economists, lots to look at, lots to analyse, but an absolutely torrid time for businesses. I mean, everything has been flung at businesses over the last 10 years. So it's really interesting to take part in this kind of survey and to be able to assess what is happening to local businesses and how you're all seeing things. So thank you everybody who has participated in the survey, and please keep doing so. But I want to start by looking at the background to this survey. So this is GDP by sector across the UK. The Scottish numbers would be very, very similar. And what it's showing us is the movement between February and July, so since the pandemic started. So we all saw the horrific figures that GDP, which is our measure of economic activity, it fell 20% in April when we were all locked down. It then rose 2% in May, 9% in June, and nearly 7% in July. So it has recovered some of the output lost. In fact, it's recovered about half of the output lost during the lockdown. But output is still, as you can see from this chart, nearly 12% below the levels of activity seen in February. You can see that on the bar at the far right of the chart. So what this chart is looking at is the impact of the pandemic on different sectors in the economy. And you can see that there's been some very different performances from different sectors. All of them have lost ground since February, but agriculture has lost only 2%, whereas services have lost almost 13%. And that's really important because agriculture, although it's done well, it only accounts for less than 1% of the whole economy, whereas the services sector accounts for between 75 and 80%. So what's happening in the services sector will give you a very good steer of what's happening to overall GDP. And of course, the services figures, they're heavily influenced by the fact that hotels and food services are still really suffering. Output in July in those sectors was 60% below the February levels. So there's still a lot of recovery to go there. You can see from the chart, construction was also weak. At the end of July, it was still almost 12% below February levels. Having said that, it did very well in July itself. It was up 18% during July. So I think next time we look at this chart, we should see some considerable recovery from construction as new housing activity helps to boost output. So against this background, if we can look at the next chart, this is showing us the key variables. So this is all the key results that we found in our survey. We have 8 key variables that we look at. Every single one of them improved during the third quarter, but the majority are still below the zero line, so they're still signalling some degree of contraction in local economic activity. What we're looking at here is what's called a net balance. So we calculate that by working out the percentage of negative responses, and we take that away from the percentage of positive responses. And that means that a positive reading is telling us that activity is increasing, and a negative reading tells us that it's contracting. And this is in line with the Scottish Chamber's own economic survey. So most of the factors highlighted in this chart are still contracting, albeit at a slower pace than we were looking at in June. I mean, if you think these numbers look bad, I can remind you that the revenue bar, which is now standing at -3, this was -56 last time we did the survey. Orders, which is the third bar from the left, is now at -2. This was -52 last time. And wages, second from the right, is now a positive territory, it's +5, but this was -16 last time. So you can see there's been a lot of improvement, and that's really encouraging. But it's still worrying to see that profits, cash flow, and investment are all still recording fairly weak readings. Profits improved from -51 to -26. That's still a huge negative. And it really emphasises the extent to which local businesses are still being challenged by events. And cash flow, which is the all-important variable that often determines whether a business survives or not, again, that's improved from -47 but it's still worryingly low at -18 now. So we really have a mixed bag here. It's really encouraging to see the improvement we have seen in all these variables, but some of the key variables are still definitely much weaker than we would like to see. But it's quite easy to see why this is the case, as you can see from this next slide, which looks at the operational impact of COVID-19. So we asked businesses to tell us what changes they'd had to make in their business operations as a result of the pandemic. Some firms have had to introduce several changes, so these percentages do not add up to 100. Some firms, we think on average, most firms have introduced 2 changes. So what we're seeing is that the most popular change has been the introduction of flexible working. 42% of respondents, nearly half of local businesses, have experimented with this over the last few months. And 38% of businesses have had to make changes to their products or services. In addition, you can see from the chart that 35% have made changes to their working space, whether that's an office or a workshop. And right at the bottom of the chart, you can see only 12% of respondents have said they've not had to make any changes at all. And I suspect that that's largely very small businesses, often single people working at home anyway, and they haven't really had to make much change to the products that they offer or to their own working conditions. But in general, you can see from the chart that businesses across the area have had to make lots of changes. And of course, all of these come at a cost, which is one explanation as to why profitability and cash flow are still struggling. But having said that, it is really encouraging to see just how flexible local businesses have been. They've managed to introduce some fairly big operational changes within a relatively small period of time, and that has to be encouraging. So where has this got us to? If we look at the next slide, you can see current operating capacity. And this is effectively tracking the success of these changes. So last time we did this survey, firms across Dundee and Angus were operating at just 54% of capacity on average. And if you look at the very bottom bar on this chart, you can see the figures now at 69%. So there's been a big improvement in operating capacity of about 15% just over the last 3 months. As we saw before, agriculture and finance and insurance sectors are operating at the highest levels of capacity, 88% in the case of agriculture and 87% in the case of finance and insurance. And we're guessing that's because a lot of workers in the finance and insurance industry have been able to carry on by working from home. Neither of these sectors has really moved much over the last 3 months. They were both showing fairly high operating capacity last time, and that's the case this time too. But some sectors have shown huge improvement in the last 3 months. Construction has more than doubled its operating capacity to 76% now, and retail has had an even bigger increase from just 33% operating capacity last time to 78% now. But if you look at the chart, you can see hospitality as a sector still operating at the lowest level of capacity, just 35%. That's worryingly low, but it was only 13% last time that we did the survey. So again, we have seen a huge improvement, but there's clearly still a lot of pressure against some sectors. So capacity has increased in the last 3 months. It's reflected in the results that we've seen so far. And if we look at the next chart now, you can see the impact of this on sales revenue. So we're looking at how revenue has changed over the last 3 months. And again, this chart is an encouraging one. It shows us that now 31% of local businesses have reported an increase in revenue over the last 3 months. You can see that by looking at the purple bar in the total category. Last time we did this survey, it was only 10%. So 10% of businesses were saying revenue had increased. Now 31% are saying revenue has increased. So that is encouraging. And a further 35% have said this time that their revenue has remained constant. But what's worrying, if you look at the orange bars, is that 34% of local businesses have experienced a decline in revenue in the last 3 months. And that's concerning because it shows just how precarious the situation still is. Firms trading in Scotland, you can see from the second set of bars, and the exporters, which are the set of bars at the right of the chart, they've fared better than firms who are trading in the rest of the UK out with Scotland. Across firms trading in the rest of UK, you can see that not very many of them are saying that revenue has increased. We're either seeing a huge percentage, almost 45-50%, saying that revenue hasn't moved, and just about 40% saying that revenue has actually declined. So we looked at which sectors were reporting the most stress in this area, and it seems to be construction and hospitality-based businesses which are experiencing the biggest challenges in the UK, but out with Scotland at this point in time. So I guess that makes sense. Construction we saw was weak in the GDP figures, but having seen that there was a big improvement in July, hopefully next time round in the survey we will see an improvement in the construction sector. But the hospitality sector still has its challenges, as we all know. But overall, I think we can take some comfort from these results, but we still hope to see more improvement in the next 3 months. And we definitely want to see the net balance figure improve. It's currently -3, but we want to see that improve to a positive number next time round. But to get some insight into what happened next time round, we need to look at orders, and that's what this next chart is showing us, because that helps to give us a prediction of sales. So this again is slightly more encouraging. 36% of total firms, as you can see from the top bars in the chart, 36% have seen orders increase in the last 3 months, and 25% have reported that orders have remained constant. So if you add those together, 61% of local businesses are saying that they're seeing stability or they're seeing some signs of improvement, and that is definitely encouraging. But on the downside, 39% of local businesses have reported a decline in orders over the last 3 months, and that obviously gives us some cause for concern. And you can see from the chart that the deterioration is greatest in the case of export orders and orders from the UK. And again, we looked at the sectors to see where the stress points are. And once again, it's construction and hospitality, which seem to be most challenged, but this time also joined by the retail sector. And again, that would all seem to make sense with what we're seeing in terms of restrictions to activity. So revenue is better than it was. Orders are better than they were, but revenue is still challenged and orders are still challenged. And what we're seeing is that construction, hospitality and the retail sectors are still under most stress. So what impact is this having on business optimism across the region? Well, in this next chart, you can see that there's been quite a lot of change since last time. It's quite a busy chart. Hopefully it's not too confusing. And basically the pink bars reflect a change in confidence from last year. And if we look at the pink bars, you can see there's only 2 sectors are currently more confident than they were at this time last year. The first one is agriculture, and the second one is finance and insurance. And if you think back to the slide where we were looking at operating capacity, it was these 2 sectors which had held up best. So it's not really any surprise that they are seeing the most optimism compared to last year. So that all ties in. But other sectors have not been so lucky. Healthcare, tourism, transport, these have all lost most confidence over the last year. In fact, most of the participants in these sectors were saying that they were less confident than they were at this time last year. If we look at the blue-green coloured bars, you can see that the change in confidence over the last 3 months has been much more positive. So it looks a lot more optimistic. Several sectors have turned positive, And that's even been enough to push the total number, which you can see at the very bottom of the chart, that's been pushed into positive territory, which is really encouraging. But even though this is a much more optimistic and encouraging view, you can see that there's still some sectors which are reporting an overall decrease in optimism just over the last 3 months. Notably, that's the arts and creative sector, education, healthcare, hospitality and retail. In the case of both hospitality and retail, I think we can say that that's consistent with what we saw in the previous slide when we were looking at orders. So we are seeing a much more mixed bag of results this time round. Last time, everything was very negative, but this time we're seeing some sectors recovering quite well, but others still facing challenges. And if we look on the next chart, this is looking at some of the factors which have become more important to business owners in the last 3 months. So these are, well, a few of them are economic factors. We asked everybody again, you can answer more than one factor has become important, and that's what we would expect to be the case. So we've ranked the factors in terms of how many people have said it's become a bigger issue for them. And you can see taxation comes top of the list, followed by competition and exchange rates. So all very important factors. And we looked to see where has the biggest change been. And we saw that more businesses have become increasingly concerned about taxation, which has pushed it into the number 1 spot, but also more businesses have become concerned about exchange rates. So I'm going to have a quick look now at the taxation issue, inflation, and also exchange rates, just to see what I think the outlook might be over the next few months for each of these factors. So if we start off with the next chart, which is looking at public sector debt, I think this puts into perspective some of the reasons as to why people are getting more and more concerned about taxation. So this chart is looking at public sector debt as a percentage of GDP. If you look at the final bar, the sort of turquoise coloured bar, it's moved over 100%. It's about 101.5 at the moment, I think. It's at its highest level since early 1960s, and that's when we were still paying off the debt from 2 world wars. So this increase in debt, and particularly to the level of 100, does reflect the extent to which public sector finances have deteriorated. A lot of economists will say that once debt gets to 100% of GDP, it becomes a much bigger burden on the government and prevents them from basically having the money to be able to invest in infrastructure, etc., because a lot of the money is going to paying the interest on the debt. What we've seen is a huge deterioration in public finances over the last few months. Government spending has increased really sharply and revenue has fallen. And just in August alone, the government spent £78.5 billion. 10 billion of that was supporting jobs. And that's almost 20 billion higher than the government spent in August of last year. And that's just in one single month. And of course, this has been going on for several months between April and August. And if we look at that period between April and August, government spending has increased by more than 34%, but the tax receipts have fallen by more than 13%. So we're seeing this gaping hole opening up in public finances. The biggest falls in government revenue have come through VAT, income tax and corporation tax. So if we look at the fiscal year since the start of April, VAT has fallen by £13.5 billion. Income tax receipts have fallen by nearly 7 billion and corporation tax receipts by nearly 6 billion. So if we add those up, we've got £26.5 billion less revenue just in those 5 months. And of course, spending has been going up at the same time. So hence the reason everybody's worried about taxation and will it need to rise? And I think inevitably it will need to rise. But having listened to Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer last week, he said there'll be no budget this year. He extended the VAT cut for hospitality until the end of March. And that suggests that the government's not minded to increase taxes while the economy is still weak, because that would probably be self-defeating. They also have the big advantage at the moment that government debt is cheap to operate. I said, it used to be that once debt got to 100% of GDP, it became a huge burden. But at the moment, the 10-year government bond yield is only around 0.2%. And in fact, the latest figures that we've seen have shown that government interest payments have actually fallen recently by around £8 billion. So it's much easier for the government to service its debt. We also have the situation that we're not the only country in this situation. Everybody's seeing the same thing happening. So in terms of international rankings and confidence, this isn't likely to affect us any more badly than any other country. And that means there should still be demand for UK government debt. So I would say in the short term, the government is minded to go down the increased debt route, but obviously in the longer term, and depending where all this goes and how big a gap in public sector finances we do have, we are very likely going to see some tax increases coming. But as I say, I think that'll be much further down the road. An important variable in terms of interest rates and the government's ability to pay the interest on its debt is inflation. And that's what this next chart is looking at. Because bond yields and index-linked bond yields in particular are linked to the retail price index. Can we have a look at the inflation chart? Hello?
Well, it's moved on my screen.
It's moved on my screen, Alison.
It has moved, Shona. You're not seeing it.
I'm not seeing it. I'll just carry on regardless. I'll presume everybody else can see it. Okay, so, I can see it now. That's perfect. Right, so as I said, government bond yields, index-linked bond yields are linked to the retail price index. So prospects for inflation are also key. So this chart is looking at what is driving inflationary pressure. The headline rate of inflation in August, it fell from 1.1% in July to just 0.5% in August. So a big decline, and certainly no signs of any inflationary pressure. This is showing all 13 major categories of pricing. Only 2 out of 13 categories are showing any upward moves. The first one is housing, household services, and the second one is recreation and culture. Recreation and culture in this regard is a huge sector. It covers all sorts of things. One of the moves that was influencing this particular month is the price of computer game downloads, because this sector covers games, toys, hobbies, etc. But it also includes package holidays, and the prices there have fallen. So that's why we've seen a sort of an increase, but a muted increase across the sector as a whole. In terms of negative pressures, you can see that clothing has been quite significant. That's because we've really lost our seasonal trend in clothing. Basically, we've been seeing discounting since the lockdown began. And so we didn't have the huge summer sales that we normally would have had. And then we would normally see an increase in prices as the sort of winter collections came into the shops during August. But of course, we haven't seen that this year. And so that's dragging down the overall inflation rate. But the big move during August was the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. And you can see here that that's had a big move in terms of restaurant and hotel pricing, and that has pulled down the headline rate of inflation. So it helped to generate demand, but also helped to push inflation down at the same time. Now, clearly that scheme has ended, but there's still a lot of discounting going on in the sector. I think we will see a bounce back in this number next time, so we'll probably see the headline rate of inflation pick up a little bit again, but I don't think it's going to be a significant move. Demand's just too weak at the moment to see any huge increase in inflation. Basically, there's 2 types of inflation. There's inflation which is driven by high demand pushing prices up, and then there's inflation driven by costs. And as I say, I don't think demand in the economy is strong enough at the moment to really drive inflation higher. So I think the future for inflation is all going to be about costs. And one of the biggest influences on costs is exchange rates, which is shown in the next slide. I can see that one now. Thank you, Alison. So this is looking at sterling trade-weighted exchange rate. So basically, it's looking at the performance of sterling against all the other major currencies which we trade with. And I think this chart shows quite clearly that the biggest influence on the exchange rate is Brexit, and that's likely to continue for the next few months at least. The reason I say that is you can see the sharp downward move in the run-up to the Brexit referendum in 2016, and then a further downward move when the result was announced. And that reflected the fact that regardless of your opinion on Brexit itself, the international investors do not like uncertainty, and Brexit brought uncertainty. And that's the reason that sterling was being sold off at that time. So having reached a sort of recent peak of 92, 93 in 2015, sterling has really been trading within a band of 75 to 80 since the Brexit referendum. So generally 15 to 20% lower than it had been. And this depreciation of sterling feeds through into higher import prices, higher producer prices, and then eventually higher prices and inflation for consumers. So, as I said before, government bond yields, index linked in particular, they move in line with inflation. So a much weaker exchange rate could push government financing costs higher, and that could even mean that taxes are more likely to rise in the future. So we need to look closely at sterling over the next few months. As I said, it is largely driven at the moment by Brexit. We've got trade negotiations going on again as we speak. The next few weeks up to the 15th of October are extremely important, but I wish I had a pound for every time that I've said that. This is probably going to continue right up to the end of the year. What is encouraging is that, taking away all of the political posturing and the noise around the negotiations, there does seem to be political will on both sides to reach a favourable agreement. So we have to hope that that is the case and that we will see some stability in the exchange rate, because the last thing we need to see at the moment is weaker sterling, as that would add to our issues. So moving on, pulling all of this together and taking into account the factors which the survey respondents are concerned about, we're looking at what companies are expecting for the next few months. And this is looking at expectations in terms of sales. So this, I think, is a really encouraging chart. And I say that because if you look at the blue bars and the total revenue expectations, it's gone above 50. It's actually at a level of 51. So more than half of local businesses expect revenue to increase in the next 3 months. And I think that, as I say, is really encouraging. Only 24% are expecting a decrease. And that gives a really encouraging net balance figure of plus 27, which is fantastic to see. What is interesting is that the local businesses who trade in the rest of the UK outside of Scotland, again, they're remaining much more pessimistic about future revenue. Only 26% of these firms who responded to our survey expect sales revenue to increase, but 30% expect sales to fall further, giving a net balance of -4. That's the only negative net balance that we have in that table. So that is clearly disappointing. So again, we looked at the results on a sector basis to see if we could get a bit more clarity around this. And the sectors which were most positive were the trade sectors, healthcare, agriculture. So they're most optimistic about future revenue. But when we looked at the sectors we were much more hesitant, it was tourism, and that was particularly about sales made outside of Scotland. And unfortunately, it looks like this could continue to be a challenging time for these companies over the next few months. But overall, as I say, a much more encouraging chart for us to look at. And then in the next chart, we're looking at the expectations for future business prospects. So we introduced a new question into the survey, given the high level of uncertainty that we're all facing at the moment. And we asked businesses to assess their own future business prospects over the next 12 months. And you can see the results on this chart. So what is encouraging is that several sectors have got a very positive outlook for the year ahead. And it's agriculture, the arts sector, tourism and trades, all expecting their business prospects to improve over the next 12 months. And several other sectors are also positive, and that includes finance and insurance, business services, oil and gas and education. But you can see from the chart, if you look at the left-hand side, that there's two sectors who still have some concerns about the year ahead: construction and the retail sector. So they're both still recording negative balances. What is also worrying, it's not depicted here, but it's in the data which is underlying these charts. It's showing us that 7% of local businesses said that they are concerned they might not even survive the next 12 months, and that is obviously of some concern. These sectors were, these companies, I should say, were spread across several sectors, but the majority were located in education and training and the hospitality sector. So, reflecting again the challenges that businesses in particular sectors are facing at this point in time. But overall, very positive news in these survey results. As I say, we do have some concerns too. What we've done now is pooled all of these results together to create our own Dundee and Angus Chamber of Commerce Business Sentiment Indicator. This is a new indicator which we've created. We've taken the history for the last 2-3 years, and we've created 2 sub-indices, and you can see these on the next chart. One looking at an assessment of current conditions, and the other one is looking at an assessment of expectations. So what we have here, the purple line is showing us the current conditions which local businesses are seeing. So as I say, what we've done is we've pulled together all of the data from all of the questions being asked. We've classified the questions as whether they're assessing the current activity or whether they're assessing the future. We've put them together and we've created 2 individual series. So if you look at the purple line showing the current conditions, you can see it's had a big improvement. It was at a record low of -39 last time. It's risen now to -10, still negative. So it's still telling us that local businesses feel challenged to some extent, but we have to take heart from the fact that we have seen such a big improvement. What is really encouraging is that the expectations index, which is the pink line, remains above the 0 line, the 0 axis. And that tells us that businesses are expecting an increase in activity in the coming months. So that is encouraging. It had slipped into negative territory last year. And this was at the time when all the Brexit furore was at its peak. It was in the run-up to Theresa May's tenure as Prime Minister coming to an end. And as I say, lots of political upheaval. And at that point, the expectations index went negative, but it has been positive since. And we have seen an improvement, a gradual improvement, but at least it's an improvement over the last 3 months. And when you look at this type of indicator, it's really important and encouraging if you see the expectations index being higher than the current conditions, because that tells you that businesses looking ahead feel more encouraged, and therefore they're more likely to invest in their businesses, and that they're probably seeing higher orders coming in, which is helping them in terms of their assessment of a rosier future. So that's encouraging. We have created a headline index, but I think it's more interesting to show this split between expectations and current. But what we have at the moment is our current conditions standing at -10%, expectations standing at plus 10%, and so the overall index, surprise, surprise, is standing at 0. It's really knife edge situation, and we really hope that next time round it will have turned slightly more positive and will be above the line. So that's all from me. Just want to thank everybody again for taking part in the survey, because the results which have been thrown up are really interesting to analyse. But as I say, that's all from me, and back to Alison.
Thank you. I'm just going to unshare my screen and come back. So time for some questions, and I guess anybody that that wants to come in the usual way, if you kind of know your way around Teams and want to put your virtual hand up, or you want to drop something into the chat and kind of just alert me to anything that you want to even just chip in or kind of ask, then that's what we're here for. Sean, I've got just a few things that you may plead the fifth on, but as we were going through that, there were a few things that kind of made me wonder about. So, I mean, I know we did the survey and asked the questions before the Chancellor unveiled his measures last week. Not a continuation of the furlough scheme, but some support for employers. There was the kind of the pause of the VAT rate for hospitality businesses and a bit more in terms of support for their industry. Is it too early to get a feel for how that has been taken by the financial markets? It's obviously too early for us to know what local businesses really think of it, but has there been any reaction in the financial markets to that?
I think, well, the markets had a couple of weak days and a couple of strong days in the last week, so it is hard to assess. The opinion seems to be that, we had all been worried about the impact on unemployment when we came to the end of October and the end of the furlough scheme, and that then we would see a big increase in unemployment. I think that has now been pushed out further. So certainly that gets us to the end of the year at least, and possibly a little bit beyond that. So it is just a case of sort of probably kicking the can down the road. We've seen figures already which have shown us that the unemployment which is occurring at the moment has been among the youngsters, so 16 to 24-year-olds, because they tend to work in the sectors which have been hit hardest, notably hospitality. We haven't seen too much unemployment in the other age groups at the moment. I think the new scheme, I think opinions on it vary depending on the nature of your business, to be honest. The Chancellor did talk about the need for jobs to be viable, and I think that very much comes through when you look at the arithmetic behind the scheme. You've got to be able to work in ninths, I think, to calculate who pays what and who gets what. So it does reduce the government's expenditure on the scheme, so that will help public finances to some extent. But the employers, if you're planning to keep 3 people working at 33% of their hours, you end up paying about 155% of the wages. Whereas obviously if you employed one person for 100%, you'd be paying 100% of the wages. So this is where the viability of the jobs comes in. And if the jobs are skilled and you don't want to lose those skills and then have to rehire, it definitely makes sense. But if you're not in that category, there's a lot of hard thinking to be done. So as I say, it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because hopefully lots of people will have heard of the Kickstart scheme that the UK government launched, and obviously that predates, but I'm sure must colour the kind of the support that the Chancellor unveiled. But the Chamber has been we applied to be an intermediary for that Kickstart scheme, so that basically means that anybody that's got less than 30 jobs as an employer to employ directly through the Kickstart scheme can come to the Chamber and get support to employ a young person. So we've seen unbelievable demand, actually. I mean, I think Donna in our team is looking after that, but we've seen something like an indication of about 150 jobs from local employers being created to take young people off unemployment, off universal credit, and that lets the employers claim 25 hours of wages for that young person for 6 months. So that's going to, I think that's going to make a marked difference. But still, it's a little bit like you're talking about kicking the can down the road. It's certainly going to provide some really decent, relatively short-term relief for young people, and also, I always look at things from the business side. So for me, it will help a business create a role or create some capacity for a project maybe, or something they want to do. It helps them see whether there's viability in that role longer term. And actually we're very sure that what we're going to do is get some business support into those businesses, so that whether it's looking for additional funding or helping businesses access the right business support to grow, hopefully over those 6 months we can help those businesses create at least some of those into full-time and permanent roles. So yeah, really positive actually about that. And I think if every region is seeing something similar, then I mean, of course it's not going to fix the bigger, wider problem, but it's certainly going to go a little way to supporting maybe some of those sectors that are going to find it really difficult, but also help some young people get some really good skills. Because I think what we are going to have to see, and you touched on it, Siobhan, I think in the viable word, and also the Chancellor's talked about it in some of the businesses that he's seeking to support. I think if there's industries that are going to naturally contract and others that are going to expand at this time, then it's about helping people retrain and kind of move themselves into those jobs where there's longer term sustainable future. So very, very interesting. Another question I had is really about how, I mean, every country seems to be doing something slightly differently. I've heard through our overseas contacts actually that people have said that the furlough scheme and the UK support is pretty unprecedented, really. And I know, as I say, everybody's doing something slightly different. But is the slide that you put up about public sector debt and the percentage of GDP, are we seeing a similar picture to other global economies? Is it much the same everywhere else?
Yes, I think actually we have a bit of an advantage in that our debt to GDP level started off a bit lower than some other countries. So ours has reached 100, but several countries have already been above 100. The US reached 100 last year, the year before. So, I mean, they're now moving well above that. Countries like Italy, Greece, Japan, I mean, you're talking huge levels of debt to GDP. And Japan is an interesting one because their debt to GDP is well over 200%, but they've been able to live with it because they invest so much abroad that, net, it's not too big a burden for them. But I'm saying not too big a burden, but it clearly is a burden, because since their debt level reached these high peaks, the Japanese economy has never really been able to show much growth, because there's so much of the assets and the capacity in the country just goes to paying the servicing the debt. So it is a burden, and as I say, our debt to GDP level has increased sharply, but we're not the only country in that position. And I think in terms of bond yields and being able to finance the debt, international rankings, international standing is important. And if we were the only country in this situation, I'd be a lot more worried. But because we're all in this situation, I think everybody understands why debt is moving upwards as it is.
And so looking at that international picture then, I know that particularly through some of the work we've done with the Scandinavian countries and kind of my visits to Sweden and Denmark in particular, they tend to have much higher taxation environments. But there's a real acceptance, I think, or there was before all of this, in kind of, people and businesses kind of, well, they accept it because they see a pretty decent level of investment. So I'm interested in do we think then that one offsets the other, and how does an economy quite get to that level of acceptance? And will we see large investment programmes like HS2 really doing what the government wants it to do, which is kind of levelling out economic growth away from London and the southeast? That's a big, long, lots of questions thing.
Well, taking Scandinavia first, I think Sweden's an interesting one at the moment, isn't it? Because they've gone their own way in terms of the pandemic, and I think it throws up the question that all governments are facing at the moment: do you save lives or do you save livelihoods? And Sweden went down one path. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of what the Swedish government did. It's not that everybody's bought in and said that they did the best thing by not having a lockdown. But they were able to shield vulnerable people, and they still have a high death rate. The economy was still hit because people still chose to lock themselves down. But when you look at their position in terms of public finances and that compared to us, then you can see that that there is a big difference. I think across Scandinavia as a whole, the mindset there is more sort of social democracy and willingness to pay higher taxes, but the use of the money, the way that the state disperses the money, that it is just a different mindset. I do wonder if we will move more towards that type of approach. But as I say, the big question for all governments at the moment is, especially now that we're seeing the case numbers of COVID-19 increase again, is, do you really tighten restrictions have an impact on livelihoods, which therefore has an impact on health, or do you allow the economy to continue and pay the price in terms of, the COVID-19 pandemic? So it's a really tricky situation, unprecedented times. There's nothing in history really to grab onto and say this is how we should do it. And I think every country's just sort of grappling their way through it and watching what everybody else is doing. Having said that, the scheme which has now been introduced here to help jobs is a form of the German government's Kurzarbeiten scheme, which they've been running successfully for many years. And it does seem to be a good way of keeping skilled workers in position. But I think the German scheme is more generous than the scheme which has been introduced in the UK. But clearly everybody's watching each other. In terms of the big projects, I think the idea behind that is obviously that if you do big capital projects, that through what we would call the multiplier in economics does help to generate growth, and that you end up getting back a lot more than you put in. But the danger with these things is that the benefits maybe don't come in the area where they're most needed in the country, and it's whether there are suitable projects of a large enough scale that can be done in the most deprived regions which really need the boost. So I think there's always going to be a lot of political discussion about that as much as economic. So yeah. It's a tricky one. In principle, it's a good idea. Lots of infrastructure spending. It's certainly something which I think Boris Johnson's been quite keen to roll out across the country. But when you look at our public finances, etc., I think every project now is really going to be scrutinised, and lots of questions over stopping some of the big projects to release enough cash to be able to put elsewhere. So a tricky time for doing this type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I mean, I'm involved with the Tay Cities Deal Joint Committee, and, our frustration in trying to get the funding for that agreed and over the line. I've seen public sector colleagues and those in the universities that are really heavily engaged in the projects themselves put so much work into that. And the longer it goes on, it's like the equivalent is, you're going to kind of, well, we're going to put in a new kitchen in our house, and we've dithered for months, but you dither, the prices change, you have to get more quotes, your contractors are not available when you thought they were. So and to do that on these massive scales, and just to see all those costs have to be rebalanced is really frustrating. And and I think for a project like that, it's going to see 350 million pounds injected into our local economy. It's really, really vital we get that moving, and unlock some of the private sector investment as well. And I think that forms a key part of the discussions we're having on our international trade missions as well. Although what we're doing is taking Scottish companies out there to look at the opportunities that there are for them out there, it's as much about us showcasing opportunities here and trying to attract inward investment, and getting further investment in programmes like MSIP, and then in the kind of Angus projects around Montrose and Dundee's waterfront. All of that is just hugely vital in helping local businesses. And I think that brings me to sort of an observation. I'm not sure we'll have an answer for this one, Shona, but supply chains for key sectors, particularly in one of your slides where we were talking to sectors about what their expectations and future orders were looking like, and hospitality and education. Well, hospitality was really quite low and education was pretty flat. But, we then see some support go in directly into those sectors, but the suppliers and the supply chain for those sectors really don't get to enjoy some of the mechanisms that are put in place. So what concerns me, and I think we hear this, maybe it's not directly come through in our survey, is that the suppliers there are feeling really locked out of that support, and the events industry in particular is campaigning significantly at the moment as a kind of an overlooked series of businesses. And I think the difficulty there is that they're all perhaps doing something slightly different. So they've not got an industry sector where, so you might have a marketing firm that always deals with the events industry, or you've actually got a caterer that is seeing no business events, or you might just be a hotel that would normally see a lot of business visitors for conferences. So there are a number of those kind of key suppliers that are just not able to get moving again. And we didn't really come to a conclusion about our findings on the education and training sector in particular, but it's a worry, isn't it, I think, for the suppliers, and I'm not sure even if anybody on the call or the meeting with us has got any thoughts or observations on that. But yeah, Shona, you probably have an awful lot to kind of add to what I've said, apart from it's definitely a worrying time for them.
Yes, it is. I mean, we have seen some adjustment of supply chains with businesses maybe going more local. But in the grand scheme of things, that's probably a small percentage. I think what was worrying in our survey, in the question which you mentioned there, was the fact that 7% of businesses were saying they're not even sure they're going to survive. Because the survey is anonymous, we obviously do a lot of guessing as to why people are saying what they're saying, and our thoughts were that in terms of the education sector, it was probably sort of business training type operations where I would normally be doing face-to-face workshops, etc., and it is much trickier to constantly be doing everything over Zoom or Teams, etc. So there are a lot of challenges for specific sectors like that. Arts and creative, we know, are really struggling as well, events and so on. It's really tough, and it is worrying to see that 7% of businesses, are that concerned about the coming 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, the Chamber has been doing some conversations and kind of talking to a bunch of businesses in recent weeks, and we've got Vaso, one of our colleagues, on the event today. Now, Vaso, for those of you that haven't met Vaso, is our circular Tayside manager, and she works as a business support for any business in any sector that really is interested in the circular economy and sustainability and how you can innovate your business. And I think we probably all thought back in kind of April that people would just go into fear mode, and I think that happened for a little while, but businesses are definitely beginning to come back out of that and look at how they can innovate and support. We had a session last week with our Circular Tayside ambassadors where we were looking at a charter that Vaso's developing, which is about businesses kind of working their way through, how am I doing in terms of recycling? What does that mean for my innovation, and how can I really innovate my business? And I can see a difference in how businesses feel if they're taking some active steps to kind of get themselves involved in looking at what they're doing and looking at innovation and potentially looking at new markets. But there is the other side of all of this, which is, more cars on the road because people are not necessarily using public transport the same, and we're not flying the same, much to Donna's. You can tell how difficult all of this is for the aviation industry. So, Shona, it's a bit of a balance, or we can't have everything, can we? Because climate change was something that was such a strong kind of driver, and we've seen all the governments really coming out and saying that that's got to be the future, and yet I think our current ways of working are sort of leading us slightly down a not so climate aware path. I mean, is there? You seen anything in any of the economics that talks about any of that?
I think it's early days yet to see real long-term economic studies on the impact of this. But I mean, we just have to look around. We're all using a lot more plastic in terms of PPE, etc., aren't we, than was the case before. But then there are other areas where, as I say, some changes maybe in supply chain, more local suppliers, so less transport being used. So I think we're more hearing anecdotal evidence at the moment, and I think it'll be some time before it's all pulled together into what has been the impact of everything.
Sorry, let me just try and put the camera.
Vaso, come in.
Yeah. Hi. So one of my questions is that if you look at it historically, after every big financial crisis, either because of a war or because of another issue, you've always had the market has come back, but usually there is an associated CO2 emissions increase with that. So every time economic activity translates into increased CO2. Now, with all the funding, with a lot of the funding packages, they have this green recovery label where they require people to say how they're going to manage their CO2 emissions while recovering from the crisis. But I wanted to ask you if you think that is something doable or realistic.
I think there definitely is an opportunity here, because people are rethinking everything. I think one of our slides showed, the changes that people have had to make to their businesses in the last few months. And I think what's really encouraging is the fact that they've been able to make these changes. So I think in a lot of cases, people have sat back and they've really, sort of re-examined the whole business model that they're using, and there definitely is opportunity there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Donna, I might be being slightly mean, but you seem to have put your camera back on, and it's a bit like when you're in an audience and you catch eye contact and you didn't mean it. But I mean, I can see that the industry is really hammered, and it's not just about I think our carbon footprint impact, but about the employment. So I don't know if there was anything at all you wanted to add or not. Feel free to note.
Yeah, for us, it's just been pretty devastating. Hospitality and transport is just it's just an ongoing kind of spiral to the bottom. It's we are having redundancies in Loganair. We've been using the furlough scheme. We've got a new internal scheme with the company where we're retaining I think 50 employees. They're on a 40% before this latest one came out from the government. So we've been desperately looking at ways to just keep everybody there without any payoffs. But I think we were the last airline out of all the kind of recognisable ones to take any action, and resisted it as much as we could. But, you know, like you keep saying, cash flow is king. And, you know, if people aren't booking to travel even next summer, we're not getting any money coming in, and we have a lot of fixed costs. These aircraft are costly to maintain. They have regular requirements that come along whether or not we're flying them. We've got fees to pay for everything. So, you know, God knows you would never put your own savings into an airline. It's always a passionate opportunity, I think, definitely, maybe not a business one, but just really terrifying times for us. And we're just trying to stay confident and, you know, look to next summer, look to where this just might be what it is now. So what's the best we can do with that? We should be sitting in a good position, being more or less a domestic airline to kind of staycation, but we're not. We haven't seen any of that. And mainly that's because I think a lot of hospitality places just are in areas that are resistant, or the communities are resistant to opening the doors. So we're kind of just blocked right in the middle. And I'm not even joking when I say things are changing. I've been off a long weekend here, and I'm up at my mum's in Inverness, and I'm almost dreading going back to seeing what's the next chunk of flying that's been taken out, or what's the next response, or what are the figures telling us. It's just been backbreaking. But we're still here, and we're fighting, and that's all we can do. And we're just doing our very best to hang on in there with the core and what works, and take the frills off, and just remember who we are, and keep fighting to just survive. But I have so much sympathy.
Am I right in thinking that you've actually begun to move some freight around as well? And because I've seen that.
So we've taken loads of opportunities. We are really fortunate in our managing director, Jonathan Hinkles. He's incredible. You know, if only he could be replicated around industry, we'd all be in a much better place. And he just immediately looked for opportunities, as everybody does. But we took part in the air ambulance. So we have a permanent aircraft on standby for the Scottish Government, where we have it all kitted out to be able to take the pods back from the islands. We've not been required to do that, which is phenomenal. It's like people complaining that the Nightingale hospitals haven't been used. It's just like, is that not a good thing? I don't understand this commentary that goes on all the time. It's fantastic that we've not been called for a mission, but we've just had that big outbreak in Uist in the last few days. I think last night there were 17 cases, and they've not had a case all the way through, and it's devastating for these small communities. I mean, absolutely devastating. They just do not have the infrastructure to manage it. So we are in key position for that. We've also started we always have had freight operation. We've always worked with Royal Mail, but we've upped that and increased it. We're doing a lot of charters, actually. Oil and gas is still going, but we are doing the football teams. I think we were in Toulouse at the weekend there with one of the football. I don't really work in charter, so I'm kind of spinning this as I go, but we're definitely much more active because we have the aircraft available. So like everybody, we're just trying to use our assets as we can, but it's piecemeal. You know, we definitely need the bigger operation to be in place and working for all the bits of the jigsaw to come together. And as time goes on, you're realizing there is no normal, there is no old normal, new normal. I don't know what there is. There is just now, and that's it. And I think it's great to see what we think might come in the future and what sort of steps are being taken, and put things into context, which Sean has done really well today, which is, you know, it's given me some sort of feeling of calm a little bit more than I had this earlier on this morning. But yeah, it's tough, really, really tough.
Thank you. Thanks, Donna. Okay, so would be very unlike me to finish on time, but I'm nearly there. So massive thank you to you, Shona, for helping just to put a real context to the report that we've published. It always makes so much more sense when you talk about it and kind of bring it to life. So it's a lot of work taking all of the answers, the hundreds of answers that we got from everybody, and kind of shaping them into something. I'm really excited that we got this index and the indicator launched. When we, even just as we were talking about it, as we were pulling together the report, it's really obvious. You can see the impact of instability and uncertainty on how businesses actually feel, and what they think is going to happen to them in the future. And we saw a significant spike in the run up to the general election last year, and the in and the out, and the are we not Brexiting, what on earth was going on. And I think we're still really worryingly seeing businesses say, oh, Brexit, I'm not really sure how that affects me. And so I would just say that, please look out for some of the chamber events that are going to be coming up, because Brexit impacts us all. Whether it's the fact that you supply to somebody that is impacted by the exchange rates, or whether they actually bring in goods and they can't get their goods in, and that means that you can't go in and actually help them on their supply, their production lines, whatever it might be. It absolutely will affect every single one of us, as will the trade negotiations. So the next few months are going to be critical, and the more information we can get as businesses, the more that helps us feel stability and helps us be a bit securer in terms of investing and what we're doing. So thank you, Shona, and mega thanks to Donna for coming on and talking to us and updating us on Loganair. Thank you to Sarah for all her organisation, and thank you to you who came on the webinar with us today. But if you're watching on Facebook Live, or you're watching us as we kind of share this after the event, thank you for participating. Thank you to you if you took part in the survey, because if we didn't have your business data, we wouldn't have an event and a report and an indicator to bring out to you. So look forward to seeing you at our next series of events and other things that we're doing. If you haven't yet signed up for any of the other events that we've got coming up, I just wanted to put some dates your way. So on the 6th of October, Tuesday, we're bringing our next virtual DAC 123 to you. So that will be networking and a chance to kind of have a discussion with people in business in the local area about some of the topical issues that we have to discuss. We've also got a Connect 4 online training session. So it's about PR and comms, the next one on Thursday, the 8th of October. And if there's ever a time that you need to be reminding your customers you're here, you've done something different, that there's something going on, and that they should be paying attention to you and buying from you, then this is absolutely the time to keep your profile as high as possible. So please come along and kind of hear from 4 local experts that we'll have talking to you about PR and comms. And then we talked about Brexit and what's happening there, and by the 16th of October, it'll be 75 days to go. And actually that is relatively frightening to me, because there's a significant percentage of businesses that are still saying that they haven't really prepared, that they're not really sure. And I think if we haven't got information, then how do we prepare? It's a very kind of difficult thing to look at. But please take part in some of our webinars and hear from our British Chamber colleagues about how you can prepare for that. So lots going on, and also school holidays in October. So if you're coming up on some holidays, get out and about, and use your money and spend and support some of our local businesses, book a flight to Barra and enjoy that beach landing. But I look forward to seeing you all on some of our events in the upcoming series that we've got going on. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you.
Use your money and spend and support some of our local businesses, and book a flight to Barra and enjoy that beach landing. But I look forward to seeing you all on some of our events in the upcoming series that we've got going on. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you.